high-stakes standoff. Analyzing a potential Iranian closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran, Iran. In a dramatic escalation of geopolitical tensions following reported U.S. airstrikes on its nuclear facilities, Iran's parliament has approved a measure to close the Strait of Hormuz, a critical artery for global energy supplies. The final decision rests with Iran's Supreme National Security Council, but the move has already sent shockwaves through the international community, raising the specter of a full-blown military confrontation and a severe global economic crisis. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, is the world's most important oil channel. Approximately 20% of the world's total oil consumption, along with significant volumes of liquefied natural gas, passes through it daily. Any disruption to this traffic flow would have immediate and far-reaching consequences. The spark: U.S. airstrikes and Iranian retaliation. The current crisis was ignited by what sources report as U.S. airstrikes targeting 3 of Iran's key nuclear sites. This direct American military intervention into the escalating conflict between Iran and Israel marks a significant turning point. In response, Tehran has signaled its readiness to use one of its most potent, non-nuclear deterrents: the ability to disrupt maritime trade in the Strait of Hormuz. While Iran has made such threats in the past, the current context of direct military engagement with the United States raises the stakes to an unprecedented level. Furthermore, the declaration of support for Iran by Yemen's Houthi rebels adds another layer of complexity, potentially widening the conflict's geographic scope. Legal maneuvers in a sea of tension under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which Iran has signed but not ratified. All ships, including military vessels, are granted the right of transit passage through international straits. An attempt by Iran to close the strait would be a clear violation of this international law. However, in the midst of military hostilities, legal arguments are likely to be superseded by strategic and military imperative. Tehran may argue that the airstrikes constitute an act of war, thereby justifying what it would frame as a defensive measure, a region on a knife's edge. Military and strategic calculations. A closure of the Strait of Hormuz would not be a simple act. It would require a significant and sustained military effort by Iran to enforce a blockade. Iran's capabilities. Naval forces. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' navy is equipped with a large fleet of small, fast, and highly maneuverable armed boats, ideal for asymmetric warfare in the strait's confined waters. Anti-ship missiles. Iran possesses a diverse arsenal of land-based, anti-ship cruise missiles with varying ranges and capabilities. Sea mines. The laying of naval mines is another potent tool in Iran's arsenal to disrupt shipping lanes. Drones and submarines. Iran has also developed a range of aerial vehicles and has a small fleet of submarines that could be deployed to harass and attack shipping. International response and military countermeasures. United States. The U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet is headquartered in Bahrain, in close proximity to the Strait of Hormuz. It operates a powerful array of warships, including aircraft carriers, destroyers, and mines specifically designed to ensure freedom of navigation. The U.S. has repeatedly stated that any attempt to close the strait would be a red line. International coalition. In the event of a closure, the U.S. would likely lead a multinational coalition to reopen the waterway. This could involve naval escorts for commercial shipping, minesweeping operations, and potentially strikes against Iranian military assets that threaten navigation. The critical question is not whether a U.S.-led coalition could eventually reopen the strait, but for how long it could be effectively closed or disrupted, and at what cost. Even a temporary closure would have a devastating impact on the global economy. Economic reverberations. A global shockwave. The economic consequences of a closure, even a partial one, would be immediate and severe. Oil prices. Crude oil prices would likely skyrocket, potentially doubling or even tripling in a short period. This would lead to a sharp increase in gasoline prices and energy costs for consumers and industries worldwide. Global inflation. A surge in energy prices would fuel global inflation, putting further pressure on households and businesses already grappling with economic challenges. Supply chain disruptions. The halt in the flow of oil and LNG would disrupt global supply chains, impacting everything from manufacturing to transportation. Recessionary risks. A prolonged closure of the strait could tip the global economy into a recession. Countries heavily dependent on energy imports, particularly in Asia, would be the most vulnerable. Diplomatic fallout. A world divided. The international diplomatic response to an Iranian closure would be fractured. United States and its allies. Washington and its key allies in Europe and the region would condemn the move as an act of aggression and a threat to global security. They would likely pursue a combination of diplomatic pressure and military action to reopen the strait. China and Russia, while both have condemned the initial US airstrikes, the response to a closure would be more nuanced. China is a major importer of Iranian oil and has a vested interest in the freedom of navigation. However, it also has a strategic partnership with Iran and is unlikely to support US-led military action. Russia's position would likely align with China's, seeking to de-escalate the military confrontation while criticizing US actions. Regional powers. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, whose economies are heavily reliant on oil exports through the strait, would be severely impacted and would likely support international efforts to reopen the water. Potential scenarios and the path forward. The situation remains highly volatile, with several potential scenarios. De-escalation, perhaps opting for less provocative actions to signal its displeasure. Limited disruption. Iran could engage in harassment of shipping or limited military exercises within the strait to drive up insurance costs and create uncertainty without implementing a full blockade. Full closure and military confrontation. A decision by Iran's Supreme National Security Council to proceed with a full closure would almost certainly trigger a military response from the United States and its allies, leading to a direct and potentially devastating conflict in the Persian Gulf. The immediate priority for the international community is to de-escalate the crisis and prevent a catastrophic conflict. This will require intense diplomatic engagement with all parties involved, including a clear articulation of the severe consequences of a closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The world holds its breath as the standoff in this vital waterway threatens to spiral out of control.